Hey everyone, my name is Sean. Welcome to the channel, or if you're not new here, welcome back. Today, I want to tell you guys a bit about South Korea, my experiences there as an American, and also some super important things that you should probably know before you go if you're planning a trip. So without further ado, let's hop into it. Now, I feel like this should be a given at this point, but just as a disclaimer, this is my personal experience. If you visit the country, you may have an entirely different experience than I did. And that could be for the best, maybe, because that's the beauty of traveling, right? I also want to share with you guys where I actually went, so you have some context for that. So I spent about 2.5 weeks in South Korea, visiting my good friend Hosea, who moved there about 3 years ago. Get into a bit of that soon. I started my trip in the capital, Seoul, where I spent 2 days there in a awesome hostel, met some really cool people, had some really cool experiences with that to start off. Then I flew down to Jeju Island, which is one of the vacation hotspots of South Korea. Spent about 3 or 4 days there, then hopped over to Busan, a coastal city in the southeastern part of the country. Spent about a week there with my friend and his family before finally going back to Seoul for another 4 or 5 days. So did a major loop, you could say. I think it's also known as the tourist triangle because those are the 3 hotspots of the country. But it has that name for a very good reason, as there are some really cool things you could do there, and we'll hop into those right now. So here we go. Alright guys, first thing that is super important is maps. So maps really don't work too well in Korea, at least traditional maps that you and I may be familiar with if you're American too, like Google Maps, Apple Maps, those kinds of things. They're not going to be too helpful for you in Korea. So the one app that you really need to get before you go is called Naver Map. There are some other ones, but this one is the most popular in Korea. It has the best, routes and guidance for subways or walking, and even just reviews if you're looking at restaurants or cafes, etc. So that is an absolute must before you go. So make sure you do that before you hop on the plane and get to Korea. Second thing I want to mention, guys, to prepare you upon your arrival is make sure you have some cash. Now, unlike a lot of Western countries I've been to, or at least in America as well, it's a lot more cash focused in the East, or at least speaking for my experience in South Korea. I used cash at a lot of different places. I used it for vending machines, just ordering basic things. Of course, there are typically options for a card if you need it, but most importantly, when I was initially getting a subway from the airport, it was cash only, and that really wasted a lot of my time initially. This is something I did not expect upon my arrival. So make sure that you have, maybe at least $100 worth of cash so you could change to Korean won. Quick conversion if you're on the street and you're trying to tell, is this a ripoff or not, is if you take $1 that's equal to about 1,000 Korean won. So if you just take off 3 zeros or move 3 decimal places from the amount of won that you see, that should be roughly the price that it is worth in US dollars. So I could give you a very quick conversion just to do some mental math to see, is this a good price or not? I'll put the actual conversion rate up here so you know specifically if you want to get really analytical with it. But just quick mental math on the street, really good tip to know as well. That helped me out a lot. This is another thing I wanted to mention, especially if you are visiting Seoul, which I bet a lot of you are if you're going to Korea. So if you're staying in Seoul, one of the top places I recommend to stay, if you're younger crowd, say you're under 35, maybe around my age, and if you do like to go out as well, you definitely want to stay in Hongdae. That is on the western side of the city. It is an area that really sprung up, I believe, in the 1990s due to a liberal arts university, Hongdae University, I believe, as well, that was in the area. So you have a lot of students flocking there, a lot of people with a lot of energy that want to go out and have a good time. So that's a great place to stay. That's where I stayed in my hostel. Want to give a quick shout out, honestly, to Jin's Paradise. That's the name of the hostel I stayed at. Shout out to Jin's Paradise. You should stay there. I'm not being obviously endorsed to say that. It's just a really, really cool spot. He's a really cool guy. One thing I noticed is if you're a big partier too, Koreans frickin' party hard, man. Woo! Like my first night I go out in Korea, get right off the plane. I land at maybe 7 p.m. local time. Check into my hostel and I meet these guys and they're all fired up because it's their first day too. So we go out, we send it. And I'm out till 5:30 in the morning, and I don't go out like that. Now it's like, let's say Sunday morning, I wake up around 8:30 a.m. after I have my full day of rest. This guy and a bunch of others are coming back from the night out. Like literally at 9 in the morning, I'm waking up to sightsee and they're coming back. So obviously that's, not saying that's everybody in Korea, but it certainly does happen. And if you do want to party really hard, that's where you want to stay. And that is a crowd that you can most certainly find because people are doing it. And it's also more of a foreigner-friendly district. Then another thing, just public transport in general in Korea. Compared to the US, it's a lot different in terms of, I would say, the layout, just the cleanliness, and also the respect behind it. So one thing I immediately noticed is how pristine the subway itself is. Very clean, very organized, going from the actual structure of each car to how people interact with each other, or lack thereof, I should say. It is very quiet on subways and buses. I took both of them with my friend and solo, and everyone is very quiet, with the exception of some elderly folks. My friend told me that they typically get a pass when it comes to noise just because of age, and respect is a very big thing in Korean culture. It changes how you address people, who you may bow to, blah, blah, blah. Going back to my initial point, it's very clean, very structured. So when you're on a Korean subway, definitely make sure to be quiet unless it requires you to absolutely talk, or if someone asks you a question for whatever reason. You probably just don't want to be blabbering about random stuff. When you walk into the subway, I'll try to put up a photo of this. When you walk into the subway, there may be seats on the side, and they're typically reserved for elderly folks as well. So you'll see maybe a little picture of a mannequin or something holding a cane, like a little stick figure, and it's supposed to, signify it's an elderly person. So don't sit there, unless, of course, you're an elderly person going, but don't sit there if you're someone like me and you're able-bodied. That would obviously be very disrespectful, and they're typically used by elderly people all the time. Self-explanatory, but I just want to put that out there, because I guarantee you will definitely piss some people off, and you just don't want that reputation, So be respectful of that. Be quieter on the subways and buses. You'll have a pleasant experience. Another thing I want to note as well with subways, I know this is going on a major subway tangent, but I think it's very fascinating to hear about and just to know for your own sake. I've seen some posts of people visiting the country, and they'll sit down next to someone, or they have a group of people, right? Let's say 2 to 4 people. Go on the subway, they're traveling together. 1 or 2 of them sits down on 2 open seats, and then people get up and move away. And some people have perceived that as, oh, I'm a foreigner and they don't want to associate or be near me. I mean, that could be the case, but that's probably not what's happening. What the Korean folks are probably doing is they're just being courteous, and they're offering up their seats, or they're moving and positioning themselves in a different area so you could sit together. And that's one thing I noticed very often, and the Koreans won't be shy about it either, which is kind of nice. It's kind of refreshing. There was one time I was with my friend Hosea. There was one seat open, like here, let's say. There were 3 older men, and then there was another seat. And we sat, in those 2 seats isolated. And then the old guys just tapped me on the shoulder and said something in Korean I didn't understand, but kind of pointed to have me move over. And then they had the seats for us to sit together, so that was super nice of them, and it worked out. And there was another time when I was kind of being oblivious, just standing, holding one of the handles with my AirPods in, and I didn't realize someone got up from a seat, and this older man tapped me on the shoulder and goes, so, signaling that one of the seats open, and I sat down. So I think that's really cool. Like, one of the, I don't know if the word would be like collectivist of the society, but the collectivism of the society in that sense, you could really tell people are looking out for each other. Just even in those little instances, it was something I noticed was very different in America, in my opinion. We like a lot of our space. I mean, a lot of times on public transport when I'm going to the city, someone will sit on the outside of a row and then have their bag on the inside, so it deters people from sitting next to them. So that is one major cultural difference. Feel free to agree to disagree, but that's something I've noticed firsthand and is a major difference. So I just wanted to call that out.